And we're back for the last session of the second day of the What Works conference. Thank you very much. As has been our has been our practice. I want to start by acknowledging that we're coming to you from Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. And we acknowledge the lands on which we live, work, celebrate, and heal are the ancestral homelands of the Miami, Lenape, Wyandot, and Shawnee peoples, among others. The disputed Treaty of Greenville in 1795 and the forced removal of indigenous peoples from this region allowed for the founding of the college in the early 1800s. As a community, we are committed to confronting this dark past while also embracing, through education and outreach, the many indigenous communities that continue to thrive in Ohio. We're pleased in this last block to have two speakers with us. And we will we'll start with supporting executive function skill development in neurodivergent and neurotypical students for maximum academic wellness with Megan Sheldon, academic coach and tutoring center coordinator at Champlain College. Megan.
Great, thank you so much. It's a delight to be here. It's an absolute pleasure. Let's see, I am also a Kenyon alum, and I was there this past weekend for reunion. So it is a special thrill and delight to be with you all today, and I'm so glad to be here, and excited and terrified. So this is amazing. So yeah, let's jump right into it. The presentation that I'm going to give is just a quick talk about supporting executive function skill development. A lot of you are probably super familiar with this already. There are probably disciplinary experts in the room. So just to say that we can probably crowdsource some really good information if we need to as we go along, but I'm just going to give you everything I can to get everybody's feet under us, or wheels under us, or whatever we want under us. And let's see, let me just move us through. So just a brief introduction about me. You know, I do work at Champlain College. I'm in the academic support services dimension. I'm an academic coach, and I co-coordinate the tutoring center, the peer-to-peer tutoring center at Champlain College, which is a pre-professional college in Burlington, Vermont, full of amazingly neurodivergent learners. And I'm also a professional coach. I coach mid-career professionals as well as college and pre-college students, primarily around executive function and holistic productivity as defined by them. So I'm really passionate about helping people develop their own sensibility about what productivity looks like for them and helping them get to where they want to be with that. I also teach multi-generational, super inclusive dance fitness. And I maintain a small private coaching practice. And my professional background is working in social work and baking artisan bread, and then being a pre-K through 12 educator, specifically working in the literacy specialist realm as a teacher leader, instructional coach, and literacy teacher. My contact information is at the bottom, and I'll also put it on the last slide as well. So let's see if I can get I'm trying Prezi for the first time in the spirit of, you know, doing new, exciting, awesome things. So here we are. I could literally talk about executive function all day long and like for the next 2 weeks, but I'm not a neuroscientist and I'm not a disciplinary expert in brain function. So just to presence that right here, right now. However, I am a really good coach and an expert teacher. And more importantly, for our purposes today, I am a true expert in the embodied experience of being a person with really strong cognitive and verbal skills that can be very easy to miss if you're assessing my work through the lens of organization, time management, or prioritization. So my executive function skills can really mask a lot of capability, and that's true for a lot of our students too, and it's true for some of us. And that's part of why I'm so passionate about this topic. Executive function, as defined by Peg Dawson and Richard Guare, who are just two of the many researchers who have been looking into this for the past 20, 25, 30 years. Their definition is that the executive function is the cognitive processes required to plan and organize activities. And this includes task initiation, follow-through, working memory, sustained attention, performance monitoring, inhibition of impulses, and goal-directed persistence. The reason that I like their definition and their framework so much is because it's broad enough to help us really understand these functions of the prefrontal cortex, and it's precise enough to help us understand how to address the needs when the skills don't appear to be present, or when academic performance, for example, for our purposes of our discussion, when academic performance does not seem to match up with what we perceive as the capability of the student. So in the cultural context that we're working in, where we're working in post-secondary ed in the United States, executive function skills are foundational to academic success. And so thanks to our species' extended neoteny and neuroplasticity, we can build these skills any old time. It is a little bit easier for our college students, our traditional college students in the 18 to 22 realm, to do that than it is for many of us, because when is really answered best by the fact that these executive function skills are really high leverage for academic performance. And by the way, they're really high leverage for self. We all win. And there's also a piece where unconscious bias and not knowing about executive function can put us educators and staff members and faculty at even greater risk for mislabeling or introducing unconscious bias as we're thinking about the academic performance and capabilities of students of color, first-gen students, and other so-called special populations. So this matters to me a great deal for a number of reasons. And so let's just ground into some definitions here. That I am going to tear through this at a pace. And it's being recorded, and you can take a screenshot. You're welcome to do whatever you would like to do to have this content available for yourself. But we could think of these skills as basically a cognitive and behavioral ecosystem in which habits develop. That's one way that I like to kind of take Dawson Gorey's framework and play with it. So the things we've talked about already: response inhibition, working memory, emotional, they call it emotional control. I prefer to think of it as emotional regulation, because I think that's really a more apt term. Sustained attention, task initiation, planning and prioritizing. And under planning and prioritizing, I like to put sequencing. That's when you put things, you do things in the right order. Pants first, then shoes is the sequencing task. And that's a sub skill that's really important in academic settings for planning and prioritizing. Globally speaking, the organization of time, space, items, and materials, time management, which of course we all probably are aware, time management itself is a co-created social and cultural construct. Because time is not understood in every culture to be a resource to be spent or allocated. That's a particular way of thinking about it that is present in the dominant culture here. And goal-directed persistence, which is like keeping your eyes on the long-term prize. Many of us who have arrived at this space of academia have probably achieved advanced degrees, and in doing so, probably we had to lean a little bit at times on our goal-directed persistence to get there, keeping the goal in mind as we did the work to proceed in that direction, some of which was not as much fun as the other things we could have been doing with our time. So we inhibited our responses toward going to the beach in order to complete the academic paper that we knew would help us in our career goals. That's an example of using goal-directed persistence and task initiation and inhibiting your responses. So we can see that to do that, we're calling on, as I said, an ecosystem of these executive function skills. Flexibility is another one that we don't always think of as an academic preceding skill, and it most definitely is. Metacognition, so big picture thinking and self-awareness about how you're doing, what you're doing, and why you're doing that. Or situational metacognition about why things are happening a certain way. And stress tolerance. So stress tolerance for everybody is getting taxed. And, for all of us, we may have different parts of our lives or different situational or cultural things going on that make it even more taxing. But I think it's fair to say that as a species, we have been tolerating a fair amount of stress over the past couple of years, collectively and individually. And there's something important to know about that, which is that persistent stress weakens and erodes your executive function performance, no matter who you are. And the area that's likely to erode the worst, the fastest, is the area that is already hardest for you. So for me, working memory. These days, 2.5, 3 years into the pandemic, if I have an idea and I go to write it on a sticky note, I could lose it before I get to the sticky note, even if I have pen and paper right there. And unfortunately, I'm not exaggerating. Now, my working memory was never great to begin with, so you probably are not at risk for falling as far as I have. But I can tell you it's not pretty these days. And although it will get better, I would like it to get better faster. And that's how some of our students are feeling right about now. And I think that's how some of us are feeling right about now, too, with regard to some of these executive function areas. And so this is just another way to see it. This is just a different a visual organization of these clusters of skills. This is another researcher's way of putting it. And so we can see that this person breaks it down into like activation, focus, effort, emotion, memory, and action. So again, same big ideas, different way to slice it. I find this one really useful when I want to think carefully about what's most difficult for a student, or what's going incredibly well for a student when there's a little bit of unevenness of performance. I like to look at both. And so every human being has an executive function profile. Like, these skills are present in every human being, and it's a different constellation for everybody. So whereas my working memory is incredibly weak and frankly has been getting weaker, my goal-directed persistence is stronger than ever. My metacognition is very strong. I'm incredibly flexible, and I have some other strengths going for me as well. But there are these places of signature difficulty that are requiring more and more of my attention and better systems to address them. And that's true for our students as well. And so some of the things that introduce variability are just simply the demands of the setting and the task itself. So writing a term paper tends to be a more difficult task for those of us with difficulty prioritizing and project managing than a 3-page written quick response tends to be. So there's some other stuff that hasn't been as present in the discussion of executive function that I want to bring in, which is that an individual student's sense of belonging in the academic community or the social setting that they're in. And this is true, by the way, for faculty and staff and other adults as well, but I'm student focused at the moment. So the sense of belonging and your internal sense of your own capability are incredibly important impacts on your executive functioning, as is your level of nervous system activation, by which I'm referring to polyvagal theory, in which we can think about whether our nervous system is overactivated, underactivated, whether we're just right to do the task that we need to be doing, whether we're in overwhelm. Your emotional state has a really profound impact on how your executive function is working. And again, in the pandemic, we've all wrangled that a little bit, but that has to do with both your emotional state baseline, your general baseline, and your present moment emotional state. So like for me right now, I'm a little bit activated, super excited, and incredibly happy. So that's my emotional state right now and in the present moment, which gives me access to a lot of energy, but doesn't help me to inhibit responses to talk. And so your present moment, your recent and ongoing emotional states and stressors have an impact. And again, for everybody, it's going to vary just a little bit. But for most of us, executive function skills, anyway, even if we are like neurotypical, in that narrow band of people that are currently considered neurotypical, even if we're in that band, and even if we haven't had chronic or developmental trauma or real difficulty or a global pandemic, still in all, we're not going to develop this set of well-working synchronous skills until we're 25. So most college students, even pre-pandemic, would not have been fully developed around their executive function, just like we weren't, because most of our college students who are traditional students don't hit 25 until after they graduate. So I say all of that simply to ground us in the reality that our students have always needed our help around executive function skill development. They always will, and right now they need it more than ever. So here we go. I've alluded to this, but this is an important cultural note. So The executive function skills model we're discussing today is it's a model. And so like any other model, models aren't right or wrong, they just are, and some of them are useful. I find this model very useful. However, it's important to think about it as a way of thinking about the set of prefrontal cortex stuff that's present with unbelievable variability in every human being. And what we're looking at it through today is the lens of a specific cultural context, which is academia in the United States at a collegiate level. That particular subculture tends to hypervalue certain outcomes and behavioral norms that are related directly with these skills. And so that's the reason we're going to kind of focus in, really take a tight lens on these skills. But I don't want that to be mistaken for me positing that this way of looking at the world is correct or the only way, because many other cultural situations and cultural contexts do not value the same things that United States academia at a collegiate level values. And so I just want to be clear about that. We want to keep that in mind. This is not the end all be all of how to be a human being. What we're talking about is how to find academic success and wellness in a specific setting. Okay, so let's see, where have we arrived here? Yes, so neurodivergence, neurotypicality, and neurodiversity. You probably all know this. I'm just going to presence that neurodivergent simply means that you're not falling into the narrow band of what's currently getting called neurotypical. So that means if you're on the autism spectrum, if you've got ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, hyperlexia, Tourette's, anything that kind of puts you outside this very narrow norm, so to say, then you might be considered or refer to yourself as neurodivergent. It's a word that came initially out of autism spectrum advocacy and work, but has now been applied much more broadly. Neurotypical, I think I've mentioned, refers to this small band of people who present with what's considered typical neurodevelopment and intellectual and cognitive functioning. And neurodiversity refers to the variation of cognitive presentations in a group of people. I'll probably make a mistake somewhere along the line with terminology, but those are the correct terms. And my bias is that neurodiversity in any group is very good for creating robust learning environments for all. That's my bias. I also have a very strong bias that neurodivergent students tend to be the most creative, innovative, and inventive thinkers and problem solvers in our academic communities. And that's why I will go to bat all day long for supporting neurodivergent students to reach the level of preceding skills that are required for thriving and contributing at the highest level in the academic setting. And the good news is we have significant leverage as faculty and staff over having that be more likely and helping our students. And why it matters to me is because I have had, and those of you who know ADHD, you've probably spotted it already, but I've had ADHD my whole life. And it has had significant educational, professional, and relational impacts. And in particular, even at my beloved Kenyon College, I had a devastating lack of academic success relative to my cognitive ability, and more painfully for me, relative to my sincere desire to thrive academically and intellectually. I did not have access at the time to executive function support. I didn't even know what it was. And I did not become aware of my own ADHD until I was 39 years old. And you can imagine that for a person with precocious cognitive ability and a extremely uneven academic performance, and that's putting it nicely, it was a very painful and confusing time, being at a selective liberal arts college that was demanding, amazing. It was like walking through a garden and there's like ripe tomatoes all around you and your arm only goes this far and they're right beyond your grasp. So this is a really emotional topic for me because I am the student who I'm talking about in many ways. And so that's why I'm here to really make a case for us helping those students, because I understand what it's like to be in that position so well. So luckily there's a ton. I'm just going to go back one second because there's a ton we can do. And so here are some of the things, and you probably already are doing a million other things. You're probably doing all of this plus, but I'm just going to present some of these ideas in case they're not already present for you. Now that I've kind of made the case for why this matters and why you can be really influential. So you can design instruction to scaffold executive function development. There are a million ways to do it. Here are some of them. You can make EF visible and teach the students about their learning, teach them why you're structuring your coursework the way you are, make executive function skill development a transparent learning goal for everybody in the room and for yourself. You can use UDL principles. We've already talked about that today, Universal Design for Learning principles. You can do things at a granular level like provide checklists, project planning maps, calendars of work, self-check quizzes, and other ways for students to monitor their progress and their learning, both. Two separate things related, their progress and their learning. You can set required sub-deadlines for submission of milestone components toward larger projects. You can use learning management software consistently across departments in ways that are maximally simple, clear, and intuitive for students. Because remember, the more we're asking students to split their attention or to do things differently in different settings, the heavier the demand is, the harder it gets. And you're going to gum up the works for students who don't have the resources to devote to that and be incredibly productive academically. So some students can manage like a bajillion different types of things. They can look in 84 different places for your coursework. They can be incredibly flexible about stuff. Others can't, and you'll just you'll be raising unnecessary and unhelpful barriers. You can also just provide immediate and iterative feedback on student work. How's the quality of the students' work, and what do you see as a learning area for them? Teach them how to take discipline-specific and course-specific notes. This is one of the highest leverage moves you could ever make for a student on behalf of a student. Just coming from the mindset that neurodiversity is fundamentally good for the learning community, and that rigor is beautifully compatible with executive function scaffolding. I'm going to say that again, because I think there's a debate sometimes between rigor and compassion, and I think it's a straw man. It's a completely unnecessary debate. We can hold true rigor, we can require excellent academic work, and we can scaffold executive function development. And in fact, when we do all three, that is when the sweet spot of learning is happening for the majority of your students. And it's also the most satisfying thing as a staff member or professor or faculty member. The other thing I just want to mention is to have a come from that if a student is not performing, there's a skill gap, and that you can teach whatever that skill gap is. Feeling grounded in that alone reassures the nervous system of everybody in your classroom, and also helps everybody know that you're not casting aspersions on their motivation or their interest or whatever. You're simply noticing that there seems to be a preceding skill that's missing, because otherwise they would be doing their work in the way that you've asked them to. And so mindset, PD, and collaboration comes right into it. Tap professional development resources, the Center for Innovative Pedagogy, the Center for Learning and Teaching, instructional coaching, workshops on executive function, hire a coach, not to be self-serving, but you could, for yourself. You could read up on executive function and UDL principles, collaborate with colleagues. Again, that come from, I put it twice on purpose, that was not an error. And as far as referring students, so of course every institution is going to vary in what resources are available to students and to faculty and to staff, and so I understand that there's tremendous variability. I'm just going to put everything I could think of though, which is you could refer students to academic coaches who understand EF. You could refer students to academic skill development programs that are EF aware. You could refer them to peer tutors in appropriate subject areas who can help them structure their discipline-specific academic approaches. So like help them build the habits that they need for biology, the habits that they need for English literature study, the habits that they need for foreign language, economics, everything, disciplinary specific approaches. You can refer them to study sessions, librarians, and other amazing resources who know how to project manage and teach it. And then the second part of that is as you're making the referral, we can tell students what we're referring them for, and we can tell them that it's a specific skill development opportunity, why we're doing it, because we believe in them as a student and a scholar, and we know that this is going to help, and we want to promote their academic well-being, and because you see it as a high leverage area that's worth their attention. And putting a referral that way, I think, really sets the whole thing up to reduce the likelihood that they're going to internalize it as something like you're not capable. It's going to increase the chance that they're going to go. and it's going to boost the overall academic wellness of the entire college or institution. And that's because executive function skills, just like a lot of other social behaviors, become contagious in peer groups. And so the influence that you're having on one student who's in your class, if you're able to coach them toward greater executive function skill development, it becomes contagious at least some of the time in their whole peer group. And that is totally worth doing. And let's see. Yeah, so here we are. We're just at about 20 minutes. My last little bit is just about what your curiosities are. So let's see. Yeah, my questions were just around where might you look to satisfy your curiosity, just to see if you have places to kind of poke at already. And my other questions were like, what are the implications of this way of thinking about executive function? So for your future students, your current students, and yourself, who would you love to talk about this with? Who would be fascinating to have a colleague conversation with? And what, if any, interdisciplinary and pedagogical concerns are being evoked for you? And then, of course, the queen of all coaching questions, what else? So let's just take a minute to kind of chew on that. I think the next slide is just a silent reflection, so maybe we'll go there and then come back. Yeah, so this is just a moment to think and take notes on what you might want to try. So let me float back to the last series of prompts just to give us a minute. And yeah, I think we're just at the time that we had agreed to stop and do questions. So if there are burning questions, I'm happy to have a conversation. If it's time to move on to the next one, happy to do that too, and I'll put my contact information up. So does anybody have anything they really want to just kind of hash out together right here, right now? And if not, that's completely fine. I'm seeing someone who looks like they might have something they want to say, but they're not saying it. So, okay, no problem. So here's my contact information. It's just been an absolute romp through executive function with you. I apologize for going so darn fast. But on the other hand, I'm also really happy to just kind of throw a bunch of stuff there. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully there's something here that was either new for you or provocative or that you would like to be in dialogue about. And here are ways to get in touch with me. So I welcome your feedback, suggestions, ideas, requests, questions, colleagueship, collaboration, all of it. And I'm just so grateful to be here. So thank you everybody for being here with me, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Megan. A lot of stuff to chew on. Because she's got her camera on, I found myself thinking a lot about Anna Hitton's presentation about the peer tutoring at Denison, and where they're doing some very explicit metacognitive work. And we've had some conversations at Kenyon actually about what kind of like just basic pedagogical training are we getting to various peer tutors or writing center consultants, and I think that's a really neat question about where are the places where we can seed some of these skills and see if they take root.
Yeah.
It also reminds me, we just did a really good workshop on planning your summer, which was executive function support for faculty.
Love it.
And maybe I should reach out to those people and say, do you have big projects in your courses where this workshop might be useful to your students?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, that'd be so great. And, I'm happy to, anything I can do to support executive function all over the world, I'm here.